I'm Dr. Berry, licensed psychologist, and here we talk about true crime and psychology. Thank you so much for joining. Let's hop right into today's topic. Let's go. Welcome. Thank you all so much for joining. I am so excited to have Josh Ritter from Courtroom Confidential joining us today. Please know his information is linked in the description, and I also have a comment tagged with the link to his stream as well. And today we are going to talk about the Abigail Zwerner case. This is a case out of Newport News, Virginia. You all know I am a Virginia-based psychologist, so I was very interested in this case. And it comes out of Newport News, Virginia. And it was January 6, 2023, where during this trial, we learned that there were multiple reports of a 6-year-old student potentially having a weapon. And because plaintiff is Abby. And so Ebony Parker, Dr. Parker, the assistant principal, she was charged with being negligent during this event. So this was the civil trial. We might mention a little bit because her criminal trial is starting on November 17th. And they did have the civil case before Ebony's her criminal case. And Abigail was awarded $10 million. She asked for $40 million, and the jury awarded her $40 million. I cannot wait to dive into Josh's thoughts about this case. So let us know what you kind of thought about this case.
I was all on board with this happening. I'm very happy to see, at least from a civil perspective, them pursuing this. We can talk a little bit more about the criminal aspect of it, but I do appreciate the idea of responsibility. And when we're talking about it in a civil context, we call it negligence and liability, but really it's the idea of responsibility being placed on other folks. We've seen, the epidemic that we're dealing with in this country of these types of shootings, and we're all trying to figure this out. And you've got people who, everybody seems to have what they feel is the best idea. And, many times they feel that their idea should be to the exclusion of other ideas. I don't know if I entirely agree with that, but you've got from folks who want more gun control to people who feel like we should be arming teachers and everything in between. And then there does seem to be this recent trend towards extending the responsibility for these things beyond the shooter themselves. So here you've got a 6-year-old. You're not going to sue a 6-year-old, but they're looking, well, who else could have been responsible? And I have always thought that in all of these discussions and thinking outside of the box, why aren't we looking at school administrators and supervisors and teachers and other people on the campus? We saw kind of a similar posture in the Ethan Crumbley case that was out of Michigan. That was the first time that you had parents held responsible criminally for the deaths. We've seen other cases, and I think even in this case, the mother may have been held responsible for, some sort of child neglect, which is a kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? Like an ancillary, like a connected but not directly involved in the crime, sort of a way of looking at it. But with the Crumbleys, it was the first time where they said, we actually believe you are criminally responsible for the end result, which is remarkable because you're talking about a third party taking action in between. Yes, the parents, I think everybody can agree, were negligent in the way that they supervised their child, negligent in the supervision of the weapon. But now you're saying his independent actions, they should also be held responsible for. So putting that case aside, while watching that case, I'm thinking, well, what about the teachers and supervisors and principals and everybody else? Where do they fall in all of this? And now we're starting to see it with this case civilly, and then we're going to see it criminally. So my very long answer to your very short and simple question is that I applauded this case happening because I thought it was a good way of thinking outside of the box and further extending responsibility.
And I think this case proceeded because there were at least a few hours between the initial report of a potential weapon being on campus and the shooting activity. There was this time that
Yeah.
something could have happened, and the administration didn't do something. So I have a child that is in a Virginia elementary school, and because I think that school hadn't had any lockdown drills that year, and it was January, and those schools start in September, and I think even based on the state, within the first 30 to 60 days, I believe, so they normally don't have the kindergartners participate in the, because they're brand new to school. They don't participate in the first lockdown drills, but my child, within the first, I think, 30 days of school, they have those drills. And I even mentioned on one of my other streams that a parent at my son's school, their child said that they overheard a threat that a student was going to bring a weapon to school, and the parent contacted administration. They sent an SRO, a school resource officer, out to that child's house to do a threat assessment, that you have to do something. So I think the fact that Dr. Parker didn't do anything. So there were the teacher decided, so Miss Kovac was the reading specialist. She said, "Okay, I'll go search his book bag." Mr. Rawls, who was the school counselor, he asked the principal, "Can I search his person?" And the assistant principal said no, which, like, let's wait for mom, that they were just going to wait for mom to come. And I don't know how strongly it was really talked about during the case, but this child had so many behavior problems. And a lot of that might come out more during the criminal case, because the prior year he had choked his kindergarten teacher. He had this long-standing history of,
6 years old.
and that was when he was 5.
Wow.
But
So young.
within the home, it seemed there are allegations that there might have been some exposure to DV. There's been a lot of speculation about, because somebody asked in the chat, Nashay asked, how did he gain access to the weapon? And it was in his mother's purse. And that's how she was found guilty. I think she was in possession of cannabis, and federally in Virginia, you can't have like a substance and a weapon. I think she had a federal charge for that. And I think she was charged, I think she's sentenced to, I think, 4 years. And then I think the father, who wasn't involved with any of this, I think the father has his own criminal charge. But in this child, it's not like this was some kid that didn't have any issues and like,
Right.
what? And even if it had, to me, all potential threats should be taken seriously, that you at least check.
Yeah.
Because that school has a school resource officer, and they could have called. They could have called someone, anyone. And the Dr. Parker's attorney seemed to make it sound like it was Abigail's fault, that she could have, sequestered the class. She could have kept him by himself. She could have done all of these things.
Yeah.
I think he might have injured her sooner if he realized that she was aware that he might have something. And so in those situations, teachers often expect that the administration is going to do something.
Yeah, the whole situation doesn't, it's awful, but it also doesn't make sense. Like, I don't quite
Mm,
understand what Parker's motivations were. Like, and so a part of me is trying to wrap my head around, maybe there's this a fear about lawsuit from the parents. Like, if they go ahead and search this kid or treat this kid like he's committed a crime, maybe mom will react and mom will sue the school and maybe she'll get in trouble. Maybe there's some sort of, protocols that they have about when they can search a child or when they can't. And I kind of understand all that. I understand we live in a very litigious time when parents get very upset about things and start suing and causing problems and everything else. So I can kind of understand a little bit of hesitation there, where all of us hearing that same set of facts would go, well, search the kid immediately. What are we doing here? So I'm not trying to excuse, but I'm trying to
yeah,
understand some
yeah.
of her behavior. But that still doesn't explain why you don't take the kid out of class, put him in a safe area, wait for mom while he's in some sort of, official's office or something like that, where in case he is dangerous, he can't harm others. The other part about this is that we're not talking about
Mm.
some sort of vague general threat. This is
Specific.
people saying he's got a weapon.
Yeah.
He's got a weapon on him. A person, like you pointed out, also a kid with a history of violence, of acting out. And now you're being told a very specific thing that he is armed. It doesn't make sense to me why anybody behaved the way they did. Again, going back to that Ethan Crumbley case, I keep on referencing it because it's kind of the best example we have.
Mm-hmm.
That school shut things down nearly because he was drawing pictures. Remember that? I mean, talk about several steps removed from how specific this threat is. Now you've just got a kid who's drawing pictures. You could easily understand them making the argument in that case, well, listen, kids draw all sorts of crazy stuff. We didn't know this was something to take so seriously. But when you're being told a kid is armed, you would expect them to shut down that school and immediately, like you said, bring in threat assessment officers and everybody else to make sure to clear that, and then go, let's involve mom. Let's talk about this. Let's see where these rumors came from if there was no weapon. But just absolutely astonishing stuff.
And Virginia is a zero tolerance area where, so I have worked with students that have been kicked out of school because they made a hit list or because there was a serious threat and the school deemed it was a serious threat. So they sent them for counseling and they had to get a psych assessment, and the individual ended up at an alternative school and then when they returned to school, there was a plan for the student. Normally these are older students. And so I think Dr. Parker I don't think she thought it was a credible threat, but you have to assess it. And to me, she did not do what you would expect, that the admin would stop, would go talk to the student. Because yes, she might not know exactly which of the female students said they saw it, but she can go look, because I'm sure those girls probably, like, if you go, hey, I just need to ask, did somebody talk to did anybody in here mention something to Miss Kovac this morning? And the students likely would have said something, but, and I think Abby would have felt better because, so I look at this from the psychological side, and what can make trauma worse is when the things that you expect to happen don't happen. So what can make it worse? Because it's like, it still would have been trauma, but it might not have been as bad if she had felt supported by her administration. If she hadn't been made to feel like it's all in your head, like you just can't handle these students, like, everybody's always crying wolf over this child. And I think her concern and everybody else's concern, they may have felt like it was minimized, and that can make a situation like this feel even worse. So when bad things happen, if it happens by somebody and like you care about, if it's a family member, that's worse than a stranger. It's something happening from a stranger. So if this had happened to her just in the community, she'd probably still be a teacher. But this happened in her classroom, and there was a clear concern that was not addressed, and that just makes it difficult for somebody to ever go back into a classroom, and I don't think she ever will.
Do you think it breeds distrust towards her other students? Like, as you're speaking about this and how the lack of people believing her or taking her seriously adds to her trauma, I wonder, do you feel like she feels like she can't trust any of her students at that point? Is that part of that? We toss around this term PTSD. I toss it around. I don't really know what it means. I mean, I know what the letters stand for, but I don't know what it means like the way you understand it means. But I'm almost wondering, like, this, even like being inside of a classroom or speaking to other students, is that something that she just can't deal with psychologically?
And I think it was her mother that mentioned loud noises. So
Mm.
a balloon popping, and they didn't think about like, oh, if you go to a birthday party, so
Wow.
unexpected loud noises can bring on that reaction. Now, I work with people because when a person has experienced trauma, they now need to find a way to find safety when they are safe because bad things activate our amygdala. That's our fight, flight, freeze, people please part of our brain. And it's instinctual. So it happens automatically. You can't control it. But what I can control is how long I stay in that state. So I specialize in working with individuals with trauma, and I worked with people with chronic complex trauma. So the good thing is Abby had a nice, solid, strong childhood. And because if she hadn't had that, she may have fallen apart even more. If
Mm.
she had had a history, and then she might not have gotten, because if she had a history of PTSD, which is what the defense, they kind of tried to allege that maybe the death of her father caused trauma-like symptoms, but I don't think it was in the way that this created trauma symptoms for her. And that's what that forensic psychiatrist that Abby's team got to evaluate her. I think he was from Pennsylvania, Dr. Watson. He did a phenomenal job breaking down her symptoms and breaking down everything. But a person has to try to find a way to feel safe. But initially, it's going to be hard. That
Yeah.
just being around children with behavior problems might bring up that feeling of, am I safe? And kids, so elementary school students are going to have some behaviors. There are going to be some things, but there are some
Sure.
things that we don't expect. So we do not expect them to be so aggressive that they are harming other children, that they're harming themselves. Like, and so that's where those are major red flags that that intervention is needed. In my area, this child likely would have been in a therapeutic school
Mm.
that the school would have deemed, can we keep this child and everybody else safe? And if the answer
Yeah.
is no, then there are so in our area, so I work in the Fredericksburg, Virginia area. And down in Newport News, they have therapeutic placements as well. I used to work at a residential, so at a place where kids would live full time if they needed to be out of the home and in a treatment center, or if they just needed a treatment school, then they would just go to that therapeutic school for the day. And often those staff were trained in how to recognize the signs, how to manage behaviors. But this case was very sad. And I think you're right. I think it really did bring up a lot for Abby. And I think the jury saw it.
Well, and we talk about, I mean, it's one thing that she's still got a bullet lodged in her. I
Yeah.
mean, don't forget about that. I mean, it's like a thing she constantly carries around with her. But I think it's easy. I'm a person who's never, I mean, I've experienced trauma, but certainly never anything that I can say that I continue to kind of deal with.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what it's like in that moment. You're getting shot. I mean, she doesn't know, is she going to survive this? Is this it? Is this the end? That has got to stick with you. I'll never forget, I was speaking with a combat veteran who had been dealing with severe PTSD,
Mhm.
and just I was trying to understand it and asking him to kind of explain, what does that mean? I didn't know, does that mean you kind of walk around in a hyper sense of nervousness at all times? And he gave an example of how, if he is driving down the road and there is something in the road, like garbage, whatever, some sort of abandoned piece of something in the road, he literally feels like he has to pull over and collect himself, because he is so used to having driven through war zones where those things in the road are IEDs,
Yeah.
and those blow up on you.
Yeah.
And he just had so programmed himself and dealt with that so many times that he literally can't pass a piece of debris in the road without it bringing back all those incredibly strong memories. And that just stuck with me, that this is real disability, trauma, whatever you want to call it, that she will continue to live with. I can understand, probably even being back on that campus might be too hard for her.
Yeah. And as a lawyer, because she did try, so she did end up getting her cosmetology license, and that
Mhm.
was kind of held against her by the
Mm,
defense. But I think if she had just sat at home and done nothing, I think that may have been like, she's not even trying, because you have to do what you can.
right.
And so I think no matter what, I think the other side was going to have something to say about it.
Yeah, it comes down to damages. They're
Mhm.
they're just trying to present some sort of calculus to the jury so that they understand, because it's hard. You say $40 million and you go, well, what is that for?
Yeah.
$40 million. Were you picking that out of the sky? And then really skilled plaintiffs attorneys, they can sit down and they can go, okay, let's talk about one day of your time, one day. What would you give? What is it worth to you for one day to not have to deal with the fact that you have a bullet in your chest, to one day not have to deal with the fact that you find it, that you wake up in cold sweats from nightmares, to one day to not have to deal with the try. And you go on and on and on and on to explain just what it's like to live through one day of this person's life.
Mhm.
Would you give $10, $100, $200, whatever it is? And then you go, okay, well, now you've lost your employment. And you start to add everything up and you get this figure, let's say $1,000 a day or whatever it is. Now let's multiply that by a year. Now let's multiply that for the rest of her life. And then you start to get into these enormous figures and you can understand how they calculate it. And I've seen it done in court, and it is incredibly convincing to people, because you do realize that this isn't just about, let's pick some big number that sounds good,
Yeah.
but it's also about, wait a minute, that there is a day to day that this woman will be dealing with that she would gladly trade
Yes. To
the
know.
money to have this all undone. By
Yes.
the way, Abby Zwerner got awarded $10 million.
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee you she would happily give that $10 million back if you can undo everything she had to go through. That's what those figures mean.
Because she will never be exactly the same. I do hope that this gives some sense of, like, justice for her experience and the criminal charges that Dr. Parker is facing, and a person is innocent until found, and until they're found guilty. But she was charged for every bullet that was in the weapon. So 8 counts of felony
Mhm.
child neglect. That's
Interesting.
what she was charged with. And I just think it's a miracle that the gun jammed, because the child,
Oh, yeah.
he wanted more.
Yeah.
And so, I'm just very thankful that she survived this whole experience.
Yeah. Yeah. God, that could have. Well, yeah, you're talking about loss of other life. And then you're talking about the potential loss of his life. And then you're talking, I mean, it just, yeah, again, you go back to, I don't know what was going through that teacher's head. I just can't imagine being a teacher, assistant principal, whatever nowadays, and hearing something like that and not immediately
Mhm.
going into full-fledged, alarms and sirens to make sure that we assess this threat. And I certainly can't imagine just kind of dismissing it casually as the way that it was described she did.
Yes. And I just want to mention that Tangling with Gina mentioned that in my district, no one can search a student or confiscate a student's belongings, but an administrator or an SRO. You can be sued or fired.
Yeah.
And it was actually Miss Kovac that like went to the student and got the weapon from him, which I thought was commendable, because she put her own life and, like, she
Yeah.
went and did that. Courtroom Confidential, thank you. And so this is Josh's channel. Thank you for gifting 5 memberships. Sarah is an admin here. Thank you for gifting. And then I saved this question that so during the closing, the so I think they mean Abby's attorney mentioned the fact that Dr. Parker did not testify.
Mhm.
And the defense, Dr. Parker's team, actually asked for a mistrial
Mhm.
during that moment. And there's a lot of people talking about, because this is likely going to go to some type of negotiation,
Mhm.
and to avoid any potential appeals issue, will Abby settle for a lower number? Did you see that part of the closing where Abby's lawyer mentioned and the judge ordered a curative
Mhm.
instruction, but yeah.
Uh, I did not see it, but I've read about it, and I do understand the issues at play. And I will say that you are very wise to point out that in these civil cases, when we hear these extraordinary numbers, those are rarely, if ever, the actual number that is written on the check
Yeah.
by the defendant when the case ends. Because you're right, they immediately take this and then they go, okay, what do you really want? What are you really willing to take so that we don't appeal everything in this case? Because they can just drag it out for forever in appeals and everything else, and so many times they end up agreeing to a settlement afterwards for less money. But so the issue at play here is it is not unheard of, but it is incredibly uncommon for the civil case to take place before a criminal case.
Okay.
Usually judges will stay the civil proceedings until after the criminal case plays out. But there's no legal guarantee to that. So a judge doesn't have to stay it. I don't understand the reason why it was done in this case, especially because her criminal trial is coming up shortly. So it wasn't like they would have had to have waited all that much longer. But for whatever reason, if you know, tell me.
So I believe it was supposed to happen a while. It was supposed to happen before, but I think Abby's team had to request an extension for the civil side because I think Abby had some surgery or something coming up. I,
Okay.
I think there was something that happened. Um, and then also I was wondering if Dr. Parker was found criminally responsible because I think the
Yeah.
person that may be paying the settlement is because sometimes admin, they have
Yeah.
liability insurance.
Yeah.
So I believe
There
it's
is.
yeah, go ahead.
No, there is some insurance at play here. She's not going to be paying this out of her pocket. I mean, she doesn't have it, but yeah, there's some sort of I remember the name. I've read it, that there is some sort of insurance at play that will
Mhm.
pay for these damages. But so when you have that situation, that rare situation, or even if you don't, even if you're in the discovery process of a civil case when there's a criminal case pending, you've always got somebody's Fifth Amendment issues at play. And so what to avoid these types of issues, they will often have the civil case trail the criminal case so that by the time it gets to the civil case, their Fifth Amendment concerns are no longer at play.
Yeah.
Here they didn't do that. So she still has a Fifth Amendment right. Now, in a criminal case, it is a flat out error to ever comment on the idea that a criminal defendant didn't speak with law enforcement, refused to speak with them, or didn't take the stand. It's an immediate mistrial.
Okay.
And there's plenty of case law on this because it is seen as invoking your constitutional rights to silence that can't then be used as both a shield and then a sword against you. Civilly, though, those same rules don't apply. In some civil contexts, in California, there is legislation, there's statutes on it that say that you cannot comment on the invocation of a Fifth Amendment right in a civil trial. But in other jurisdictions, they can, and they can comment on it, and they can comment. It's called an adverse inference. They can allow the jury to draw a conclusion from that, from the idea that, hey, this person didn't testify. They're refusing to testify because they're claiming a Fifth Amendment issue. Do what you will with that kind of it. And if you think about it, that's a really, really bad position that you put the civil defendant in because they don't want to go on the record because by the way, if they go on the record, that can be used against them like any other statement they make at their criminal case.
Yeah.
So she refused to testify here.
Mhm.
In a civil case, it's a little different too, because you can't even, as the prosecution, you can't even put the defendant on the witness list. Otherwise, that would happen in every criminal case. But you can't even do that. In a civil case, the both parties oftentimes put the opposing party on their witness list, and will have them put them on the stand. So she was not refused to testify here, and they made a statement about that, and the defense objected to it because of this idea of a adverse inference being drawn, and the judge tried to cure that.
Yeah.
Now, I am not sure if there's the same rules on the books in Virginia as there are in California that may protect against that adverse inference being made. And if that is true, then there is problems. Then there is problems for the plaintiff having made that argument.
And I noticed, because I think the judge just sent the instruction. I don't think he said it again to the jury. Do you know? I think that was just something that was sent to the jury along with everything else.
I gotcha.
And then Tangling with Gina mentioned, as a teacher, our teacher association or union provided liability insurance and attorneys for us, but they had to agree that we had acted within our job description. And so yeah.
Well, no, Tangling with Gina makes an excellent point. That issue is also at play here too, because there's an argument. By the way, insurance companies are not in the business of writing checks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Insurance companies are always looking for an opportunity to not cover what they should be covering. I'm no fan of insurance companies, but what's going to happen is if she gets criminally convicted at her coming trial, I can guarantee you that insurance company is going to come back and say, we're not on the hook to pay for her civil judgment because she was acting outside of her, it's not acting outside of her employment, but it is, breaking the rules of her employment, and therefore their insurance shouldn't cover it, is what they're going to argue. So that's an interesting issue to still come up too.
Yep. And someone mentioned, Julia mentioned, what is the reason that the assistant principal decided to disregard the concerns about the student? Was it his age? And the defense did bring in a school expert, and that expert did talk about the fact that it's very rare that an elementary school student, but it's not impossible. And because Dr. Parker was doing testing that day, and it sounds like she was. And then it sounds like she did work with, because there was another discipline issue that she did, like a student was brought to her office, and but she didn't leave. And I am glad that the civil happened first, because if she's found to be criminally responsible, I was concerned that insurance company would say, we're not you didn't do what you were supposed to do, and so we're not going to cover this. And so if people do have any type of professional insurance that's provided by your organization, if you can get individual insurance, because that insurance is meant to protect the organization. So I'm a psychologist. I have worked for companies that offered liability insurance, but that liability insurance was to protect the company, not to protect me. So I always carried my own individual liability insurance as well, because that's where I am the person that's insured, and that's the lawyer that's advising me. And so, yeah.
Getting back to your point, though, that you make about whether or not his age, that you're saying that, it's incredibly statistically unlikely that a kid that, young would bring a gun. I get all that.
It happens.
But then I go back to the specificity of the threat. Like all of this would make a big difference to me if they were just saying that the only thing that they were aware of is that he was acting weird or saying a bunch of threatening things. Then I'd be like, well, 6-year-olds say stuff all the time. They talk about beating each other up all the time. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. But you've got other people saying, I've seen a weapon, right? I mean, this is like about as specific as it can get. And for her to be kind of dismissive of that is just shocking to me.
Mm-hmm. And then just going to wait for mom to come home or mom to come to school, and for mom to take care of it. And just me looking at it. So there was another local elementary school where a weapon did go off in a student's book bag. Because you mentioned the trust of maybe the other students in the room. And there were parents that questioned the security of that school after that incident happened. A lot, because normally after an incident, normally security on that location is going to be better after
Sure.
that.
You
Like
would hope. Yeah.
you would really hope. And I see a question for you. Can the prosecution bring up the civil verdict in the criminal proceedings? Yeah.
No, the great Maureen. Hi, Maureen. Maureen from Runaway. Great question, but no, because it's an entirely different standard of proof.
Yes.
So at in the criminal case, you're dealing with beyond a reasonable doubt, which is our highest standard of proof in the country. In a civil case, you're dealing with preponderance of the evidence, which is, I mean, essentially the lowest. It basically means you believe it's just more likely than not. And so we wouldn't want jurors being affected by the idea that any kind of verdict was heard in the civil case, because it's an entirely different question being presented to the jury. So they will not be made aware of that. Now,
Mm.
what they might hear
Mhm.
is like allusions to prior proceedings, because some of these people who are going to testify will have also testified in the civil case, and they can be impeached with their prior testimony in the civil case, because that's still sworn testimony. So they'll handle that by saying something along the lines of, isn't it true that at a prior proceeding, you were under oath and you said X, Y, and Z, as to try to impeach that person? But they're going to be very mindful to, even if the jurors are kind of put to connect the dots that there was some other court proceeding, they will never know that she was in fact found liable
Yeah.
at that prior proceeding.
And I think during voir dire, and that's what some people were. So I'm glad that this was streamed, because when you see how the case actually happens versus when people report on it, you just use, because what the person chooses to report on, you might notice something that wasn't reported on. And so I am glad that the case was streamed, but they will have to find a jury that has not heard about this case. And so they'll likely try to pull in a large pool, and that's probably already happened.
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering if jury selection is what starts next week. And then there's a question about, is Dr. Parker's counsel the same for the criminal case? I would assume that she would have a criminal attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know some attorneys do both.
Mhm.
I don't know, but I imagine the attorneys she had for the civil case were probably paid for by the insurance company. So they're probably more like along the lines of the insurance defense attorneys, and she'll need her own private criminal counsel for the criminal case.
Mhm. That she would either pay for, or that would be provided if she was in a situation where she couldn't afford her own. And so we will definitely follow that. Uh, did you have any questions for me as you watched?
Me?
Mhm.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, we kind of talked about it, but it is this idea of I guess just getting a better understanding of what we use that term PTSD. I think there's like a few psychological terms that all of us know and feel like we understand what it really means, but I think we talked about it, what PTSD really is, and how it can kind of manifest itself, and just, how you were saying that the idea of her ever returning to this work, physical injuries aside, are maybe impossible.
I don't think it would ever happen. And so what post-traumatic stress disorder is, it is in the DSM-5. So that is our diagnostic and statistical manual, and a person has to meet certain criteria. And one of the categories of criteria are re-experiencing. So that is where the person has thoughts about the event. There are things that kind of pop up. That's where we think of flashbacks. So where things about the event will kind of come up. So they are re-experiencing the event. In children, this can happen with bad dreams. Children often will have vague dreams. It might not be about the specific event. But with adults, it's often reliving what they experienced or something similar. There are also avoidance symptoms. And so that's where I'm being unable to. So she probably hasn't been back to that building. So maybe having difficulty even driving by that building. She may not live in Newport News. Like, so there are
Wow.
certain things. And I don't know where she lives. I don't know any of those things. But for some people, there can be those types of things that can come up after an event. I will also mention, so PTSD is treatable and there are interventions, there are things that can be done. And she is a very resilient person. So when we talk about resilience, that's a person's ability. So they go through something and they have a strong family. So her family support is phenomenal. They might have some intrinsic things that they bring, and then resilience can also be built. So I have a book. It's Turning Crisis into Clarity: How to Survive or Thrive in the Midst of Uncertainty. And there we talk about post traumatic growth, because often we talk a lot about PTSD, but often individuals that go through something like her, I could see her becoming an advocate for teacher safety, or like using her story to help others. And so that might even be part of her suing the admin and the school, might have been more about the world getting to see that what happened wasn't okay, and a jury kind of agreeing. Like for some people, that in and of itself, sometimes it's not about the money. Sometimes it's just like people are minimizing this. They're not showing any responsibility. And now a jury has said, yes, you were negligent. And so for some people, that can help them move forward in situations like that. But there are avoidance symptoms. And then there are some other, my handy dandy DSM, PTSD. Yep. So we did re-experiencing avoidance. And then, uh, and then sometimes people can, so these aren't criteria for PTSD, but it can often affect a person's affect, or like how they express emotion, where some people can become kind of like numb to everything.
Mm.
And it's almost the brain's way of giving the person a break from too much emotion and them not going too low, where they can just kind of feel nothing at all. And but some people get stuck there. And there were times where Abby was on the stand and it seemed like she was kind of checked out, or she was answering questions kind of slowly, especially when she was being cross-examined. It took her a little bit longer, but she wasn't prepared. She didn't know exactly what the other side was going to ask. And so it just took more cognitive energy, I think, for her to answer some of those questions. I've seen that in a lot of the clients that I work with. And then just to complicate things, there's also something called CPTSD, complex trauma. So PTSD, Abigail Zwerner had one horrific event that she is going to try to heal from. I work
Mhm.
with people that, like, from birth on, like, they've just had trauma after trauma after trauma. Those individuals, sometimes they might not meet criteria for traditional PTSD, because the way that we even came up with that diagnosis was from war veterans. So that
Mhm.
shell shock. When people came back and if a fire backfired, or they can't do fireworks, or they can't do loud noises. And so, but for a child that's experienced and this impact that it can have on the developing brain, sometimes that can present a little different, and that's something that I specialize into.
Wow. It's fascinating stuff. Is
Mm,
I imagine you experience um,
mm,
people dealing with like alcohol abuse, substance abuse because of that as well. I'm thinking of I've had in my family
mm.
people who are military veterans that they don't I don't think they would ever say they had PTSD, but you do seem to see a lot of self medication
Yes.
histories of that. You know what I mean? And I think we saw a generation of that even after World War II. People, before we began to really understand all of this, they were just coming back and turning towards a bottle to kind of deal with all these stresses.
And alcohol is one of the worst things you can do, because alcohol lowers inhibitions. So some of those returning veterans, their children know that they are angry when they're drunk. Or like they're sometimes it wasn't good when they would drink, or they were only okay when they were drunk, which causes that can fuel alcoholism, where maybe when they're sober, they're angry, but when they're drunk, they're actually happy and okay. So sometimes the spouse will like buy them, even though like they have a drinking
Wow.
problem, the spouse wants to keep them intoxicated because when they're sober, they're
The only
like
way you can deal
horrific
with them.
to
Ah,
to deal with. And so I often prefer, so in my state, there are things that help you relax that are legal. And so I would rather so I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything. In my state, it's legal and people can get a medical card for it. But I would prefer them to chill out with something than to drink
yeah,
alcohol because
no.
it's also a depressant. And so lowering inhibitions and increasing depression can increase risk for somebody doing something to
Yeah.
themselves or
And not to mention all the other health problems that it causes, just aside from the moment of relaxation.
and so in my videos, I always like to talk about resources. And Abby received what's called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's a type of therapy where after an event, you can sometimes believe something bad about yourself. So in this event, Abby could believe I'm not enough or nobody believes me or I wasn't strong enough. Like sometimes something happens. So this was not her fault. She did everything she could, but there might be a part of her that doesn't believe it. And so EMDR helps you identify what's that thing because of this event, what do you believe about yourself? And then what would you prefer to believe? And EMDRIA, that's emdria.org. They're an organization, it's an international organization that trains EMDR therapists. I recently went through an intensive training and it's been like so helpful because it helps reprocess subconscious things, but it's not hypnosis because sometimes things a person doesn't even realize. I've worked with people that were triggered by certain colors because it
Wow.
just the color got associated with their negative event and so it helps break those because sometimes the association the brain is just trying to keep you safe. So if I was in a car accident on a particular road, my brain it might just want to keep me safe, but it might not know because it's that animal part, it's that automatic part, but my logical brain I am safe. The road just now we do have some unsafe intersections in our area, but like there are ways to heal and there are ways to move forward. Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
Mm,
Yeah, you're right. It's just all about our brains trying to keep us safe.
yep. Yep. And I think we already talked about how the verdict could potentially impact. So if for some reason there was a guilty verdict for the criminal trial and the civil wasn't decided, could that impact the civil judgment?
Yeah, it works the other way, just
Yeah.
not from civil to criminal, but it works quite often. And that's why a lot of times these civil cases, they'll want to wait because the plaintiff's attorney's kind of hoping that the prosecution does their work for them
Yeah.
because you can take an abstract of conviction from a criminal case and enter that as an exhibit in a civil case. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal for them because then they can say, hey, by the way, this person has already been found responsible at a much higher standard of proof for this very stuff that we're accusing them of in this case. And so you do see that happen quite often.
And the interesting thing is because what Dr. Parker, Ebony Parker, what she's been charged with is to the children, because she's been charged with child, and Abigail Zwerner, it was for her duty as a teacher
Yeah,
that because to my knowledge, none of the families, because I know there have been some other instances. I think Uvalde was one. There have been some other major instances where where parents have attempted to sue the school or they've attempted to like if they thought things weren't handled well,
right.
there have been parents that have sued, but yeah,
Yeah, and Uvalde, especially, I think they're going after law enforcement, which is also an interesting question.
'cause
And we saw that, in fact,
he
in
wouldn't
I
let
think it
them
was
go in.
Parkland that deputy they felt that didn't respond, and he was criminally charged. Remember
Wow.
that case? He was acquitted for that. But yeah, it's it's a horrible subject, but there's a lot of interesting kind of legal issues coming out of all of this. But one other thing I think important to understand too is that it's a different. Not only is it a different standard, but it's an entirely different question being asked on the criminal level, because from the civil side, whenever you're talking about negligence, you're always talking about does a person have a duty to another person? It's some sort of duty of care. Yes, Dr. Berry had a duty of care to a teacher under her supervision in Zwerner. Did she breach that? Yes, she did, by not doing anything to protect her. And then you go into kind of the idea of cause, proximate cause, foreseeability, actual cause, things like that. In the criminal case, it's beyond just whether or not there was some sort of breach. Was it this conscious disregard for the health and safety of others? And that's a much higher question. Even it's not even that the proof has to be more, but the question is a more difficult question to answer for jurors. So I think that they have a strong case here. I mean, the question I ask is, if you're going to hold, again, the crumbly parents responsible for their failures to act in that case, knowing what they knew, what is different about what took place here with Dr. Berry and what she knew in her
Parker.
failure?
It's okay. You keep saying Barry.
Parker,
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Parker. Sorry, I'm still looking at your name and thinking about her.
So
Sorry, you had nothing to do with this. Just so we're all clear,
this was very clear.
Dr. Parker, and what she failed to do. And to me, that it's the same thing, So unless you see it differently, tell me. But I feel like if they found those parents responsible, I could easily see them finding her criminally responsible.
And so we'll see what comes out during Dr. Parker's trial and what the jury thinks. I would be interested to see, because she's charged with child neglect, and I think because she did not lock down the school, she did not call the SRO or any. So like she'll have to say what she did or what happened. And so it'll just be interesting to see what the defense in that case is, and how that proceeds. Because also for a criminal case, she doesn't have to present a defense.
Right.
The state has to prove their side, and so it'll be interesting. I think a lot of the same people that we saw testify in this trial, outside of Abby's mental health treatment, I think some of those same experts may come into the criminal case. But I'll definitely be keeping an eye on it. I did follow the Crumbly case, and to me, what stood out with that one is he was clearly troubled, and the parents purchased him a weapon
Mhm.
and then did not secure it.
Mhm.
And then they were notified that he was struggling that day at school, and they refused to take him home. And so I think that's where the jury thought that the parents could have done more.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, if people do choose to have weapons, please make sure that they are secured. I have a family member that is he's in the Army, and he has a biometric safe. His children, they do know, like he takes his kids are 18 and like 16 or something. Like he takes them to the range, but they do not have access to his weapons. He has a biometric safe, and so there is responsible ownership. And it's my understanding that this weapon was in the mom's purse, and there are allegations that there was DV, and that he might have almost been told to like defend her if something ever happened.
Oh, wow.
Like in
Oh,
that, and
interesting.
so
Yeah.
uh,
Do
um,
we know the history of why he targeted this teacher?
yeah.
What was the story behind that?
So he was back from a suspension.
Ah,
He had broke her phone,
his
and
teachers,
his
Werners.
teacher, yeah,
Oh,
he had broke her phone, and he got suspended for 2 days after breaking her phone. And this was his first year back to school. So it was September of 2021 when he injured the first teacher. And so he did not come back to that school that entire year of kindergarten. So for first grade, August or September, I don't know if in Newport News if they start in August or September. I think it might be September. So September of 2022 was his first year back in that school.
Wow.
And it's my understanding he was doing better. Supposedly that's what his mom said, but I don't know because his mother did a TV interview, and the family talked about him having ADHD. The things they've described is more than 80. Just my I have not met him, but like I've met kids with ADHD, and like it sounded like there was a lot more going on.
Yeah.
And then they ended up so it was January of 2023. So he had just come back to that school that school year, and he had been having issues, and that he had been suspended. And so I think he probably didn't like her. It sounded like he had a good relationship with Miss Kovac. He had a good relationship with other people. It sounds like he did not have a good relationship with, but I think she held him accountable for his behavior.
Yeah.
And
Very troubled young man. It's very sad.
very sad.
Yeah.
Very, very sad. Do you have any final thoughts as we bring the stream to a close, or any things that any cases you're following over on your channel?
This is one of them I've been following because, we don't follow a lot of civil cases because it's just not my kind of my lane that I'm most comfortable with. But I followed this one because of that question about, how far are we going to extend liability beyond the person who actually pulled the trigger? And I thought this case was a great example for that. So I'm going to be interested to follow the criminal case on this one as well. And by the way, don't be shocked, everybody, if it turns out differently, because it is such a different standard and it is such a different question. The jurors just might not see it the same way. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I always love, I can't believe we've talked for nearly an hour. I always love chatting with you because I feel like we fit those parts that the other one doesn't have as much experience with. And I'm so many of the cases that we talk about have the kind of elements that you are an expert in. So thank you for having me.
And like I said, please thank your wife. Y'all, please go over to Courtroom Confidential and give them a sub. They actually reached out. So I was a guest over on Josh's channel a few weeks ago, and
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I had a phenomenal time, and you were one of the first ones that reached out. Tiff reached out, and she was like, "Hey, do you have any cases? Would you
Yeah.
like to have Josh on?" And I was like, and that was just like this past week. I think it might have been Monday. I
Yeah.
was like, "I'm free this day, and this day." She said Saturday at 4, and I'm glad that we were able
Yeah.
to
Me
make it
too.
happen.
And anything else comes up, please have me back. I love chatting with you about this stuff.
Will do. And same for you. If
Of
there's
course.
a case that comes up over on your channel, please feel free to reach out to.
We've
And
got
so
you on speed dial. Don't worry.
good. Thank you all so much for joining. Like I said, please make sure to give Josh a sub over at Courtroom Confidential. It's linked right in the pinned comment. And I also have the website, the merch. I have everything, all of his links down in the description. I hope y'all have a good one. We will talk to you next time. Bye.